So here we are, just like the first episode, back to this arrangement. And it's a real pity because the professional look of the curtains that we figured out last week, that's all ruined. See, this is why I am no fan of the men who eat bats. Look at that. We got cardboard boxes in the background. So not off to a good start, but hey, neither is the well, it was 102 days, wasn't it? 102
102.
days without any community transmission. And what do we have to say about that tonight?
Well, we're back exactly where we started from, in the same place as we all knew we'd end up in being in the first place, which is we're just going to have to learn to live with this virus, like we learn to live with pretty much every other virus. There's just no ways, two ways about it. That's it.
And I mean, I think the problem was what they figured out over in Taiwan. Best way to do it: go all in as fast as possible. Lock down, try and get it contained. And I think we got off to a really good start in doing that. But I think when we have all of the information, when it all comes out inevitably over the next few days as to how these isolated people managed to get the virus out into the community, I think there will be a good case that we, in a sense, we lost sight of the goal. We started off really harsh, we locked down, and then we got complacent. And that wasn't just in the sense that what my younger brother was telling me, that, you know, we're watching this on the news, sort of counting down the number of days till we had gone 100 without any community transmission. It wasn't really part of our daily thought processes anymore. A few people were using that COVID-19 tracing app, but for the most part, it was business as usual. And this is this cataclysmic event that's happening in other parts of the world. And so we got complacent, but also I think the government's mandated response was dialed back, and we were not keeping tabs on the safety and on the effectiveness of what we were doing. That would have made all the difference.
I think part of the problem has stemmed from compassion. And in these kind of circumstances, I think compassion needs to be considered from both sides. And we have had a lot of people escape from quarantine for compassionate reasons, or be allowed out from quarantine on compassionate reasons. As a result of that, they have acted in a way that's discompassionate to the rest of us that are now effectively unemployed in a huge majority of cases. And people fail to realize that because we're receiving the wage subsidy at the moment, that doesn't change the fact that they are effectively unemployed, because they're being paid by the government to go to work or work from home to achieve nothing. They're not there for a business reason or a business purpose. They're not helping promote or sell anything because they can't. It's not their fault at all. But due to our compassion towards some people who have a blatant disregard for the compassionate needs of the rest of us, we are back in this situation. And it's never going to end. There is no way that this is ever going to stop. It is never going to go away. We are never going to be COVID-free, and we cannot stay locked down forever. We need to open up our borders again. We need to open up our trade routes again, because as I've just seen from Adrian Orr, we just extended our debt level out to $100 million, which is literally the maximum amount that the Reserve Bank is capable of going to, because there are no more government bonds to buy. And I really cannot emphasize how much of a horrific disaster that actually is from a quantitative easing perspective, from an economic perspective. The fact that we are now so highly indebted and we have no more reserves in that respect. There are reserves in other respects. That this really needs to be impressed upon everybody. we cannot stay this way, and we cannot stay this way for much longer. It simply won't work. Just like every other virus and disease we've ever had, we are going to have to learn to live with this like everything else. Yeah, I'll stop there for the moment.
Well, and the Americans are finding that out as we speak, trying to get through these next bills, these next massive government handouts that already are the largest in American history, surpassing the bailouts after the Great Recession. There was a fantastic cartoon I saw today from an American newspaper that basically had the Republicans and Democrats in a branded firefighting DC-10 aircraft, and they're flying over a forest fire that's labeled COVID-19. And one of them's on board saying, "That's a strange looking fire retardant." And another one's telling them, "That isn't foam, that's money." That they're dropping over this conflagration. I always mess up one word, don't I? Yeah. Yeah, so that'll be the one of the day, conflagration. Anyway, in terms of what you're saying about kindness and compassion, we happen to have a government that governs based on kindness and compassion. And I am fully in agreement in the sense that whilst kindness and compassion has its place, in the sense of fighting a pandemic, fighting a virus, it often goes against what the scientific community have recommended. And at the very beginning, we did it very well. We locked down and we were getting a handle on things. And the government mandated as part of that nobody would be able to, originally it was nobody would be able to attend funerals if they weren't in the bubble, the immediate bubble of the person who had died. And there was an absolute outcry about that. What about the tangihanga? What about, I had a family member who died one day before lockdown. What do you mean we can't give him a dignified send-off and be there for it? And so the government backed off. Against the advice of the scientific community, they started allowing people to attend funerals. And it sounds like a little thing, but it ballooned into other stuff. We weren't punishing people properly for blatantly breaching lockdown and coming up with, complete nonsense excuses, catching a man surfing or fishing and things like that. Oh, we didn't know the country was under lockdown, sort of a week after it had been announced. And overseas in Singapore, and I have a friend in Taiwan as we speak, basically the wisdom over there is you can either lock down at home or you can do it behind bars. There's no other option. That is going all out. And we dropped the ball on that one. And I'm very sorry to have to admit it.
There's two sort of things here, and to address things in what I would consider to be a consistent way, I think you have to look at the damage caused and what you've done to mitigate the causes of that damage. So you take the example of this pandemic is a great example. The damage caused by the pandemic in loss of life is very, very low. We're sort of talking, 0.1, 0.2, maybe 0.3% if at the outset. I think I saw somewhere on the global clock somewhere, it was 20 million dead worldwide, and something like 750, 760,000 have died from it. Most of those in elderly people at the top end, and infants and things as well. Well, I hate to actually bring this back to doing some kind of weird calculation about this, but the amount of value and loss of life and hardship that people are going to go through from now until when an economic recovery happens over the next sort of 15 to 20 years is going to greatly exceed the loss of life or anything that those people have suffered. And I'm sorry to say, but people die every single day. People die every single day from getting in their cars, from waking up, from sleep apnea, from allergic reactions, from so many various different things, that to turn around and say we almost lock down and destroy everybody's lives on a global scale for a virus, which we can't really do anything about right now, is utterly insane. It is an absolutely insane thing to be doing. There are lots of viruses out there. There are lots of diseases that kill lots of people all the time, every day. We do lots of dangerous things every day. And this notion of nominal safety, which is a completely nebulous, undefined term, is an insane way to try and describe anything that you are doing. The notion that we can be safe is retarded, completely and utterly retarded. You need to define what you mean by safe. Do you mean 0 deaths? If you do, as I've been saying, which is the whole thing that I've been saying about socialists for a bloody long time now, if you define safety as absolutely 0 deaths, then you can only come to one conclusion, which is everybody must stay locked in their house at all times, completely wrapped in bubble wrap, and never do anything again. But safety is not the goal. What the goal actually is acceptable risk. Right. But that can only be determined by the person who is taking the risk in the first place. I don't personally find it an acceptable risk to jump out of the aircraft, parachute or not. So I don't do it. I don't find it acceptable risk to go bungee jumping, because that's also dangerous. But people do these things all the time because they find the risk level acceptable. And what really irks me more than anything else is the fact that my right to choose my level of my safety is being taken away in favor of treating us all the same and going for what is some kind of nebulous, undefined level of safety, which, as far as I can tell, is literally 0 deaths from COVID. But that's insane and retarded and also impractical and impossible. It's never going to happen. And I can actually say this as somebody who has a very deep understanding of the knowledge and science that goes into this. I have a master's degree in this, literally. We live with this stuff all the time. The HIV epidemic in the gay community in the United States during the 1780s, did that stop men fucking each other in the ass? No. No, it did not. Why? Because they wanted to do it anyway. And they thought that the level of acceptable risk was fine. Okay. So be it. What is your level of acceptable risk? What are you prepared to do? There was 384 car accidents that resulted in a death last year. We're still getting cars. Why? Well, because we feel like we have control. We feel like we have the illusion of control over the vehicle because we're driving. I've been in 16 car accidents. Actually, 18. Only 2 were my fault. One was on a racetrack, and one was, well, not really my fault anyway. And the other 16 has been with me as a passenger. So, yeah, I like to drive. Well, because experience has taught me, in the vast majority of cases, I really don't have that many car accidents, and I'm usually pretty careful about what I do and how I interact with it to reduce my acceptable level of risk. But I am being prevented from doing so by a government with a risk level that is next to 0 for somebody in my position, because I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm in my mid-30s. My risk level is very low. I take good care of my hygiene. I know how to do that properly. I wash my hands regularly, not all the time, not a germaphobe. I expose myself to lots of other people and interactions. To go on and just lock everyone in their houses is beyond insanity. And it's going to destroy the economy afterwards.
And that's the thing. I think the whole precept is behaving like a community. So it isn't about you and me. We were supposed to be locked down without any complaint to save our most vulnerable. Now, where I got hazy, there are two things I got hazy on. Why don't we lock down the most vulnerable if they're the ones who are at risk, and try and keep the economy going to, we can't go all out, but we could at least try and keep it at a level where we can sustain our way of life somewhat. Of course, we didn't choose that. We chose to go all in level 4, I don't mind doing that if everybody's doing that and we keep our eye on the goal. But when I hear, and there's anecdotes coming out now of people who saw the isolation facilities, one man reckoned he saw a policeman standing a meter, give and take a little bit, away from a couple of new arrivals, no masks on, no social distancing. There was, well, I listened to Mike Hosking grilling Chris Hipkins about it. People, inside those quarantine facilities without masks on and things like that. And really, so it's even during lockdown, they weren't really punishing anybody for breaching it. And then right at the end, what really irked me was the government, well, the Prime Minister allowing, and I believe she even attended one of the Black Lives Matter protests. And they were saying, oh, look, we're going to come out of level 3 in several days. Well, hold on a second. Don't give me that in several days. If we're in lockdown, if I'm supposed to be not going to work and we're all supposed to be driving ourselves very lonely, if not very insane at home, I don't want any exceptions. I don't want one for David Clark trying to move house. I don't want one for people as well-intentioned as they believe themselves to be going out and having protests. It's all or nothing. They claimed to be choosing all, but in reality, and this is how the virus has gotten out, they weren't going as far as they expected us to go.
I don't. I have a few problems there. I don't think we should characterize this as punishment, because punishment indicates some kind of punitive measure that you're taking against people to get them to do what you want to do in excess of what the actual damage caused. And I think the whole point is, if you look at the actual damage caused by COVID, it's basically nothing. It's basically nothing. So how are you going to punish people in any way aside from taking punitive action against them for not abiding by some arbitrary law that you put in place? It is no different from us having the keep left rule on motorways or dual carriageways or any other roadways, which we simply don't enforce. You might as well not have it. It doesn't do anything. And if you were to look at it from what I would consider to be a libertarian perspective and say, well, what's the damage caused by somebody spreading COVID to somebody else? Well, nothing. Okay, what's the punishment then? Well, there should be nothing because it hasn't caused any damage. So what are you really worried about? Or if it has caused damage, what's the extent of that damage? And is that damage now equivalent to the amount of damage that being in lockdown is causing to everybody else? And I think what you'd find is that the amount of damage caused is significantly outweighed. And when I say significantly, I mean like 99% or 99 times or 99 billion% higher than the damage that's being caused. And if you look at it in terms of that way, rather than a punitive action, then your only conclusion must be, we need to stop this crap. Why are we doing this? This is entirely pointless. It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't prevent really any damage. And it in fact causes such a huge amount more damage than it is preventing. You can't draw any other conclusions.
Well, certainly the legal minds, of which you are one, tend to agree with you insofar as the legality of the lockdown. It turns out it wasn't legal and that nobody's really going to be punished for that reason. If it's not legal, then it's not technically enforceable. So, but failing that, and this is really a cross that everybody has to bear, because with the exception of China, well, we can never trust the figures or anything like that. But realistically, the economic damage in countries that have locked down has been horrendous, and the economic damage in countries that didn't lock down has also been horrendous. So really, when you're looking at America, you can look at Vietnam. Taiwan is a very notable exception, mainly because they got in so fast. They could still keep most things open, but there's always going to be a price to pay. And whilst I agree with your logic and I respect the conclusions that you've come to, but I think it was important. They had to make a decision very fast, and yeah, the legalities would then and now are here nor there. But once we had decided that we would make this grand experiment and try and stop COVID, I'm very sorry to say that it looks like it's been futile, and I can go into the reasons why I've adopted a bit of a doomsday scenario. But for the most part, I thought we were doing well, and we were not.
I think that kind of proved my point. Like, there's nothing we could have done. If we'd locked down a little bit earlier, like some of the small island nations did, which I suppose technically we could have, then maybe we could have stopped new infections coming here. Maybe we couldn't have. With hindsight, 2020, really easy to have a go at Jacinda for that specific reason. And as much as I really dislike the current government, and I really dislike what they're doing, would I have made a different decision knowing what she knew only at the time at which she made that decision? And I think that's a very hard thing to call. So do I blame her for the initial decision? Well, David Seymour was saying it early. Like, maybe that was the right thing to do. Maybe locking down immediately and then waiting for a bit of a time to elapse so you could bring in some more information could have been a good thing to do. We didn't do that. We end up in this situation. Well, what I definitely do blame her for now is her continued ongoing response to this. And in particular, locking the rest of us down, well, a few people completely ignore everything and randomly wander around and do whatever. And I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see more of the protests that happened up in, let's go with Whangarei. I'm pretty sure it was Whangarei this morning. There was a 60-person anti-lockdown protest organized. Well, because the Black Lives Matter are allowed to do it, so why can't we? If that is the case, what you're going to see is lots more of these protests starting up. They might get a few people infected with COVID, but it's not going to kill most of them. And it's probably not going to achieve anything either, because the government's going to keep doing what they're always doing anyway. Just really don't care what China says anymore. They're completely over their lies. We know they've been lying forever. They always will. That's what they do.
And yeah, they've given us this hell that we now have to put up with. And while we're complaining about, oh, how dare Trump say funny things like Kung Flu or refer to it as the Chinese virus, and it's hilarious. I love Kung Flu, but at the end of the day, while we sort of squabble over the the language and things like that, at the end of the day, this is a horrific economic recession. It is the defining moment of yours and my generation, I would say. It is the most consequential event that will reshape the world as we know it since probably the Second World War. And
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree.
Go on.
Definitely.
Go on. Okay.
The most defining event of our generation is going to be the American election in November.
Fair comment. Okay.
This is merely the lead up.
I did listen to Tim this morning.
Right. If you watch Tim,
he said the same thing.
Yeah, you'll see all this stuff coming up over the US. I've seen all this virus stuff coming weeks in advance of everybody. I'm all prepped and ready. I've been telling my friends to get prepped and ready. I almost guarantee that we're going to be in lockdown when the announcement comes on Friday. And I'm going to just sit here and laugh at all the people I told to prep who haven't. Well, I did tell you.
Well, I wonder if Sky Bets are taking bets for whether we're going into level 4 again or not. But
I don't like to gamble though.
Yeah, fair enough. Neither do I. But the one bet that I will always regret for the rest of my days not placing, and I just about did, I forgot all about it, was I was going to put about $200 on Trump to win the 2016 election. I can't remember the
Oh,
odds, but they gave Hillary a 93 or a 95% chance of winning at that time.
I
But
think that was a particularly hard one to call, though, because Hillary.
it was, but hey, I had faith.
Yeah, yeah. I think it takes a little bit more faith than I have to place bets on something like that. Like it was very iffy leading up to the election, and yeah, you
Yeah.
look at all the Trump destroys blah 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 memes and whatever. They're funny. I get bored and watch them, but that's not really how things are. And I'd say that's really not how things are this time around either. Biden's
Oh,
ahead of the
certainly
polls.
not.
Do you reckon? Really? Ooh, I don't know. I'm I kind of am a bit. I don't really want to call that result. I would love to, but I don't want to because if Biden does, well, it's going to be Kamala Harris now. Let's be fair. Like it's not Biden running for president; it's Kamala Harris. That's who the VP was always going to be.
Tulsi Gabbard would have been a better choice.
Yes,
She
she would have.
destroyed Kamala Harris on the debate stage. But anyway, to go back to the so once more, Trump doesn't get to hijack this podcast of ours. The what I think these latest developments with the COVID-19 crisis in New Zealand have revealed, essentially what we're looking at, what this latest community transmission was quite simply a normal accident. And there are several other countries. I believe Vietnam just had a spike at 99 days without community transmission, or without any notable community transmission. And how it goes is basically we go in all out, we lock down, we get it under control. Like I was saying before, we go back to our daily lives. It all seems to be quaint. We let our guard down. The systems that we have in place let their guard down. And it's a bit like terrorism. You know, the counter-terrorists have to be right all the time. The terrorist, the virus, only has to be right once. They only have to get out of there once. And this is what's happened. So really, if it is impossible, and it looks like it probably will be, because no country can survive for long by closing its borders indefinitely. The global supply chain doesn't allow that anymore. And really, if it's impossible to contain the virus, then perhaps all this economic hardship and in the legions of analysis that are going to be going on for the next several decades about this event, perhaps it was all for naught after all. I
It
hate to
definitely is
say
all
it.
for naught. It is definitely all for naught. I'm calling
I'd
that right
love to
now.
be proven wrong.
As I said to somebody today on Facebook, in a couple of years, no one will care. It will be merely a footnote in history as the beginning of what started World War III. This did. Well, this and the death of George Floyd, which is also a very interesting topic, but topic for another day.
Yeah, certainly. Lots of interesting topics for another day.
Always are.
And certainly we're going to have two historic elections to cover this year. And my goodness, coronavirus will be a very big issue, perhaps the defining issue in both of them. There were a lot of conspiracy mongers out of all the usual suspects, and some were even saying, "Oh, look, it's entirely a coincidence." And I love that Mike Hosking brought it up about just several days before, and how they were suddenly saying to get masks and things like that. That it did appear a bit more than just a little bit coincidental. But hey, no, I'm not so into conspiracies, and certainly this one, it may boost the Labour Party, or it may whip away their only advantage. You know, we locked down, we got
Too
COVID
early,
under
Dale.
control. If it had stayed under control until September, all well and good. It did not. You never know what's going to happen.
It was never going to stay under control. People are under the illusion that it was going to stay under control. Sorry, guys, that was never a thing. Not once, not ever, not even from December last year. That was never going to be a thing. It's not even the realm of possibility. It's completely impossible. And we will realize that in a couple of years' time and move on. You're right, though. It probably will be one of the defining things for the New Zealand election this year, and probably one of the defining things for the US election as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's about all I had to say about that.
Final thoughts? What would you do were you Prime Minister?
Okay. Do we begin from December 2019?
As of
Do we
today,
begin from,
say that
as
you're
of
the Prime
today?
Minister, you have ultimate control, you can make all decisions, and every one of your orders will be carried out exactly the way that you intend. Where you have that power, what would you do today?
I would look at the evidence. The evidence would tell me that level 4 did its job. I think in lieu of any alternative plan that we know would work, and when you consider that I believe it was Denmark who tried not to lock down, to just isolate the elderly and the most vulnerable, but business as usual otherwise, they had to change tack because too many people were getting infected. And on the one
Infected but
hand,
not dying. I think that is a very important misnomer that people are making. So like, oh, people
certainly
get
it
infected.
is.
Yeah, but people get infected by something every single day of their lives. Nobody's dying. Well, there's a few people dying, but not really very many.
The predictions of people dying, as I believe I touched on a few weeks ago, they were way off because they couldn't predict the medical help that the infected would get. And it turns out in developed countries like the one we're living in, there's plenty of help and access to respirators, isolated units in hospitals and things like that. And that has impacted the survival rate massively. Where it will no doubt turn into something resembling a Holocaust is if it gets into extremely poor countries. North Korea, and we've seen the memes and everything of the doctors practicing coronavirus treatment in North Korea, and it's a group of men in lab coats at a firing range while Kim Jong-un looks
Shit,
on.
mate, which meme boards are you on?
Yeah. But really, if it hits the developing countries, South Africa's getting hit at the moment, when you don't have any easy access to medical treatment, that's what's going to be a massive problem.
Do you not think that is literally always the case, though? Countries that are richer will weather literally anything better than countries that are poorer.
Without a doubt, absolutely.
Then why
And
worry?
I know what you're going to say now. You're going to say, why would we ruin our wealth?
No, why worry about it? Anyone that has more control over resources is going to weather literally anything more than people that have less control over resources. That's merely the nature of reality.
Certainly.
Okay.
No, you're right.
Whatever. Why are we worried about this stuff? You can't change the fundamental reality more than you can change anything else. So,
and what would Prime Minister Alcock do?
well, I'm basically
starting
going
today?
forward with David Seymour's plan. I would definitely leave everything opened up. I would sort of do exactly what you've suggested and quarantine the most at-risk people. And I would definitely strictly quarantine anyone that actually had the virus. but put the border controls in place. Open up trade and travel with those countries that have shown that they don't have any COVID infections, and make sure that everybody is tested and quarantined when they come into New Zealand, at least initially. And then sort of slowly over time, open it up to more and more places that prove they've got a semi-handle on it. But most importantly, protect our borders. We're an isolated island nation. We can do this. Do I care if COVID gets out into the population a little bit? Not really. Actually, since it's already happened now, I actually wouldn't do anything. I don't think there's any point. I think, in fact, the fastest way from now, when it was controlled, sure. But now that it's back out there again, bugger it. It doesn't actually matter. What you should do is infect everybody as much as you possibly can, and then everyone has it. And some people will build immunity, and some people won't. I mean, that's even faster and better than a vaccine. It costs way less time, money, and resources, and it achieves effectively the same result. Do some people die? Yep. But some people die every day, irrespective of what you do. Death is a natural part of life. We are far too afraid of death, and we shouldn't be. It doesn't matter. It's going to happen to everyone eventually anyway. Oh, what if some young person is taken alive early? But they're not the ones that die from this infection. It's the very old and the very young. Well, we have neonatal units. We can control the hospitals. We can control our borders. Good. Do that then. I don't think that doing these kind of things that are completely impractical, impossible, and basically utopian actually achieves anything except putting most of our workforce out of jobs, which is going to take us, what, 15, 20 years to cover from it at an absolute minimum? This is just insane. Stop the insanity.
You know what movie this reminds me of? And it's not Outbreak.
I was going to say World War Z, but what?
Oh, similar vein. 28 weeks later. Sequel to 28 days later. But specifically weeks, because if you remember that film, this was supposed to be after the virus had been the T virus was Resident Evil, after whatever they called it. After the virus was eradicated, they'd try and repopulate the British Isles, but it's still there, and all hell breaks loose again. And right at the end, it had made it to Europe, and it was all going to start again. And there was supposed to be a sequel where they were in Russia or Siberia fighting the zombie hordes then. But
right.
Yes,
I'll give you that. But
damn
who are
near
the people
impossible to
that
get a handle.
survived that movie? The people that took personal responsibility for their own risk management. If you give away your safety and ability to choose to the government, then you deserve neither or either. And I will have no qualms about having you locked away for as long as you like. You can self-quarantine forever. If you don't want to take any risk at all, stay in your house. Never come out ever again. I never want to see you in a car, bus, plane, train, or any other form of transport. I never want to see you out to the house. You're not allowed to use toaster, jugs, ovens, gas stoves. You're not allowed to do anything. If that is your position, then you must never, ever do anything ever again. Because otherwise, you are a hypocrite, and I cannot tolerate hypocrisy. And if I'm being hypocritical, please point it out to me.
Fair enough. Well, I would hope they'd still have a generator. Otherwise, how would they be able to listen to podcasts?
Very simply, I don't want them listening to my podcast.
Fair enough. Well, you heard it here first. We are doomed. Sorry.
We're not doomed. I know I sound doomy and gloomy. We're not doomed. This is not the apocalypse. Even though World War III is coming, it's not the end. Everything will continue. The Earth will keep going around the sun, at least for another 5 billion years. And we'll all be fine. Not all of us. Some of us will die, but some of us die anyway. Don't worry about things that you can't do anything about. Get on with your life.
And is that a good place to leave it?
I think so.
I think so too.
Right.
Fantastic.
Get control of the cursor back again. And